stuff I want you to follow. And so we also have the activity lesson on it that you're going to do and come back next week and present on. I'll explain it in just a moment. I think that's two.
Okay.
How many people we got here tonight? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's 8. Okay. Oh, well, all right. So here we go. We've been studying the book of Revelations, right? First, I want to thank Reverend Counselor for an opportunity to do this student teaching lesson with you. Probably going to take about 10 or 15 minutes, but we're going to do a quick overview first, okay? Everybody here knows my name is Diane Clark, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, concept overview. We have been studying the book of Revelations, and so far we've really delved deep into 3 different parts of the book of Revelation. We went over the 7 churches. We talked at length about the characteristics of the 7 churches, and then the opening of the 7 seals. And then we talked at length about the Great Tribulation, which was very thought-provoking. Do you agree? Yeah. Some of the events of the Great Tribulation unfolding, was very thought-provoking. Okay, so that included the 4 horsemen coming forward, in which the pastor said that, horses are always riding, right? There's no real timeline on when they're unleashed, they're just always riding. And then who will be able to stand after we leave the age of grace, right? During the day of judgment. Who's going to be able to endure that great tribulation? So those are the basic concepts that we have kind of looked at, right? So now, our text, Journey Through Revelation, gives us a couple of things to consider. Okay, 1, the 7 churches represent 7 different churches that will exist until Jesus comes back, right? Those 7 churches represent that. But also they represent 7 kinds of Christians, who we are, right? So they align themselves with our own characteristics as an individual saint. All right, where do you find yourself in these 7 churches? Page 19 talks about that. So I'm going to give you a page number for your activity. Now the 5th and 6th seal is a chilling warning to all unbelievers to do everything possible to win their friends, relatives, and associates, neighbors, to win them to Christ, and to avoid God's judgment, right? That's found on page 60. You want to reference that. So this is just some background information I'm giving you, because we're going to base it on it. Now, the teaching objective tonight, I want you guys to think about how what we have studied has changed you. For myself, and I'll point to me first. Coming into this lesson, I've read Revelations, right? Many of you have read Revelations, right? But have you learned anything new here, and has it affected you in a different way? So what have you gained? Like, for me, I have a more in-depth sense of what Revelations is about. It has been so thought-provoking. It has, made me realize that it's ever important for us every day to be conscious of what God would have us to do, and to be able to share that with others. It's very important because you understand the dynamics of tribulation versus great tribulation, right? And that people are going to endure that, and you don't want people to endure that, right? So how has it changed you is what I want you to think about. In this activity, there are a couple of objectives I want you to think about. Next week when you come back, I want you to verbalize this. A self-concept in relation to knowing Jesus Christ for yourself. What are your personal convictions, conflicts, concerns with temptations in your own life, in your relationship to others, such as unbelievers? Has this changed you in some way concerning your relationship with yourself, Jesus, and other people? Now, the second objective is, how do you place value on other people's salvation at this point? Has it changed you in some way in how you think about other people and their salvation, and what you should be telling them, and what you shouldn't be telling them, and things like that? So, what empathy, what compassion have you developed as a result of our lesson? Right? That's kind of written out in your activity sheet there. Okay, so now, I'm gonna have you pick a church that you most closely identify with. I have this outline here. You don't? It's in your book, but if you want to come over here and look at this, it kind of tells you each one here. If you want to do a quick overview, I want you to pick one. And then I want you to take a few minutes and talk about it, okay? Just real quick, talk about how come you picked that church amongst yourselves, not me. You're gonna talk amongst yourselves real quick. And look at it, that's why I blew this up, so you couldn't find it. There is a handout, there's a diagram in your book that talks about it as well. What page?
43.
Do you kind of feel like you identify with more than one?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay. I kind of felt that way too, so. In fact, I almost felt like I did with all 7 of them in some ways, but, I mean, that cannot be true. We kind of are overcoming different things at different periods in our lives, so. Do you have it? Can we start now? I just want to go around real quick and everybody name their church. Angelina, can we start with you? Or you're not ready?
I'm not ready yet.
Okay, is it, who's ready? Okay, Deacon Owens and then Sister Jerkins, and then we'll go from there. Which one did you pick, Deacon Owens?
Philadelphia.
All right, okay.
I'll go with Philadelphia.
Philadelphia,
Yeah.
brother, I'm sorry, Dr. Cooper. Hi. You're still trying to figure it out. Okay, Pastor?
Smyrna.
Smyrna. Okay, Smyrna. We got Philadelphia, Pergamos, Smyrna. We got 2 Deacon Bowles,
Well, I think we all like to be Philadelphia, but that's fine. Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. I think we all would like to be Philadelphia,
Yeah,
but I want you to be honest.
Time to be.
Okay.
I like Smyrna.
You think Smyrna for yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, Smyrna. All right, so this is what I'm gonna do. We have 8 of us in here. I'm gonna put you into 4s. Actually, because Sister Thelma is not gonna be back next week. She's sitting in with one of you guys, but she's not gonna come back to present. So you can sit in with any group you want. Pastor, I'm gonna ask you to join over here. And I just want you to just tell each other why you picked that and about something to www.12tribe.com or some other research resource that you may want, a library or some other website that you find. I want you to do one of 2 things, 1 of 3, 4 things, is I want you to come back and give me a quick presentation on how you plan to place value or how that this lesson has helped you place value on somebody else's salvation, or some personal synopsis, like a quick personal testimony of how you've changed, or just some other research find that you found in relation to the church that you chose or why you identify with that church, or a picture or poster you can talk about. So one of those things or a combination of those things, okay? And Pastor, you want to join this group here? We're going to take 1 more minute. Just tell them real quick why you chose that church. What about you that you think, why you think you identify most closely with that church?
Learn what we talked about. It's a process. It's basically so you want to go out and witness
Personally,
yeah.
I think they're the African
We all
I guess I see it on here.
Stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
You should be.
And that's the whole
Definitely feel-
process.
Where do you go?
Slave.
Of being a Christian. It is, you know, if Jesus Christ. The law, a whole lot of stuff. Felt that it was no way more than the moment that I did that.
They doesn't have to be an item. Issue that what they were talking
So,
about.
you have to have gone through, somebody's gone through it and backtrack and all that stuff.
He's not a Moses, but I select Philadelphia, but I like that notion of the
And then you know, they
trying to get them
right, and if they has to be, right.
His transformation, and have to be stuck with who you were.
Evangelistic things. I can always go out, and that was the last thing. The disciples were instructed to do. Just go out, be evangelistic, and to spread the word. Spread the word.
All you gotta do is jump to get your verse. That's the main.
What you gotta do with that?
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, it's somewhat weird. You find yourself on nothing. It's like,
Now, I don't know which ones you all pick. So, I'm gonna ask you to just come up, we're gonna start on this side with Deacon Johnson. We're gonna come all the way around, we're gonna ask, the pastor's gonna participate. I want him to participate. And then come up and just give me your synopsis or whatever you have. We'll start with Deacon Johnson. Yes, yeah. Just take about a minute. We're not gonna take up too much of Pastor's time because he's being very gracious to allow this, so.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The church I selected that I thought most represent me was the churches at Ephesus. And I want to speak to it from a personal perspective, if I
Go ahead.
I selected this because, as it was described, that once it was a church on fire for Christ, and then at some point it was more mechanical, rote kind of thing, and they described it as a black backsliding church, and in the process lost connection with their first love. And so I looked at that for me because I had grown up connected to the church. My mother attended, and still do now, Mount Carmel's Disciples of Christ in Newburgh, New York. And so I was part of what they call their youth council, the ECYF, sang in the choir, did all those kinds of things. And as I became an adult and went off, didn't continue that. I would go to church, to my father's church, and then go to my mother's church. So it was more a mechanical kind of activity, not connected. And when I came to Albany in 1989, there was significant changes in my life then because I had separated them from my first husband. I had a 3-year-old son. I came to Albany for an opportunity to be in the fellowship program, the education department. And it was just when I first came, a friend of mine had invited me to connect me with a church here, but I never became connected. Never joined that church. I would go, on Sunday and was not really fulfilled, felt, not connected to that church at all. And so at some point I stopped going. And by chance, I came to Macedonia for a meeting of BIG, Blacks in Government. And it was downstairs in the basement for a meeting. And a couple of weeks later was said to my son, okay, we're going to go to church. And was on my way to Mount Calvary and got to the intersection of Western and Madison and said, oh, what about that church over here that I had gone to that meeting? And I came to Macedonia. And I came back several times to Macedonia. And then I found myself, I know it was a couple of times I was like, am I going to join? Not, no, yeah, no. And the Sunday that I joined, and I've not looked back. I feel that I have engaged myself from that point on in Macedonia. I have, participated in the different activities and programs, unlike what I had done since I was a child, and in my adult years. And so I think in this, it's remembering
Okay.
my first love and
Thank you.
reconnecting.
Thank you. Thank you. The church that I picked was Pergamus, and I focused on, they had false doctrines. And a lot of times, as I referenced last week, we may use things, living or dead, that are considered idols because we put them before God. And one of the scriptures I researched was, thou shalt not have other gods before me. And I wanted to bring a picture, but the only thing that I could think of was a mirror, because looking at yourself, you're not really looking towards God. And I believe idols are caused by self-gratification. And I can help others by letting them know, in my youth, I wish I was more focused. I wish that I had trusted God more and put God before me, because I wouldn't have had ideas of things are more important to God. Family, wanting to be wealthy, anything that a young person may be thinking of. I really wish it was more in tune to what God, who God was and what He had for my life. And that's why I feel it's very important to tell you now, to start now having faith in God. Don't wait until you're older, because sometimes you feel that a religion or a walk with Christ is something they'll do when they're over 30 and above. But it's to be done right now. Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I too chose the church at Philadelphia, and these were some of the reasons and thoughts behind that choice. Since our words have power, I thought that it would be appropriate to say that I want to be the church like Philadelphia, so that can come to pass. The letter to the church of Philadelphia begins with Christ identifying Himself as holy and true, which in essence means God can be counted on to keep His promises to us. You find that in Titus 1 and 2, and so I'm comforted by that, to know that no matter what happens, as in that letter, that we've already been told and it's been established that God will keep His promises. He is holy and true. In that letter, we talk about this key that God is giving and will give to us. And it's the key in Revelation that does more than open the way to talking with those who are in royalty. It's Christ's key. It's in His hand, and it's the key that opens the door to the presence of God. And so through this, we have access to God, who has already established that He will be faithful and true and keep His word. And so that, in addition, gives me comfort with this church of Philadelphia, and gives me comfort with myself as part of that church. Even as the church is persecuted and its members are going to be martyred, should we remember that God keeps His promises. And so even though the great tribulation will come upon us, the letter to the church of Philadelphia gives us a comfort to know that God has opened the door to His kingdom and to the church of salvation to keep His promise. So because the church of Philadelphia has kept faith in Jesus, He will keep faith in the hour of trial, this text reads. And I'm also encouraged because in this letter, Philadelphia was told not to let any persons take its crown. And so it's well known for its athletic ventures, and so that's kind of a challenge to the church, to not let anyone steal that which is of God. The crown would be the victory awarded to those who would be victorious if they just stay the course.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I also chose the Church of Philadelphia, and as a target, as a goal, 7 letters, 7 messages inspired by the Holy Spirit during 7 time periods. Personal messages to those who lived more than 2,000 years ago, and most importantly, personal messages now to you, to me, and to the churches here, now and into the future. A question was asked last week: where do you see yourself among the 7 churches? Scanning the list, I chose the Church of Philadelphia. Upon closer reflection, more time to review, I realized that at different points in my life, I was a mixture of several. They remind me that a Christian walk is a process, not a straight path, the right path, but a winding road filled with trials and tribulations. The Church of Philadelphia, through various accounts, existed from AD 1750 through AD 1925. There are those who believe that it exists through to the rapture or the tribulation period. When I looked at the Church of Philadelphia, I noticed right away that it was one of the two churches that did not receive the condemnation. Why? Upon further review, if we look in the commendation column, it notes that the church had kept Christ's words and not denied his name. Damon R. Duck wrote, "The church in Philadelphia was more like what the church should be, more than any of the other churches. It was a working evangelistic, Bible-believing church." The last instruction that Jesus spoke to his disciples, he spoke of evangelism. Matthew 28, 19, 20. "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the nature of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commended you, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world." Amen. Through our studies, we learned that the name Philadelphia is composed of two Greek words that combine to mean brotherly love. It was a small church which had neither wealth nor prestige. That description fits the church of my youth to a T. I also remember close relationships and people seemingly having genuine concern and love for one another. During my membership there, the church moved 3 times to accommodate a growing congregation. Despite the size of Macedonia, I find that same connectedness and spirit of brotherly love, which tends to be a major reason for new members to join our church. The Church of Philadelphia was also known for its faithfulness, obedience, perseverance. They were told to hold fast to what they had and that Christ would deliver them from the hour of tribulation. They were also told that they would be pillars in the temple of God and will have new names. Each of the churches faced challenges. The Church of Philadelphia was no exception. According to Damon R. Duck, there were those who wanted the church in Philadelphia to deny the name of Jesus. Jesus called them imposters. They came to church and professed to be Jews, but refused to believe in Jesus or the gospel. When I would do good, the devil was all around. Determining where you are is a precursor to where you need to be. Our God is a God of second chances. The book of Revelation causes us to take an assessment of our spiritual lives and direction that we are headed. I look at these letters as report cards, midterm reports, if you will. God allows us a chance to get it right, to redeem ourselves. As my parents used to always say, a word to the wise is sufficient. How great thou art that gives us advance notice to get it right. The road can be rough and the going can be tough, but God is our Redeemer.
Amen.
Hello.
Hi.
The church I chose was Smyrna. And the reason why I chose that church is because that church had suffered persecution. And I know what it feels like to suffer through losses and persecutions. I've been in situations where I've lost a home, I lost family members, had to start all over again. But what I learned is that through Christ all things are possible. I also learned that by coming to Bible class and bringing things into remembrance. I remember my favorite Bible verse that my father taught me as a child. Find me, brethren, whatsoever things is true, whatsoever things is honest, whatsoever things is just, whatsoever things is lovely, whatsoever things is of a good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, to think on those things.
Amen.
So I had to learn how to think on things that are lovely, even though I was going through a hard time. And I think the reason why God gave me, and my dad gave me that verse, is so that I could be able to help someone else who was going through a hard time. And I found that that gives me a chance to encourage somebody else. And I chose the ministries that I chose through Macedonia, Community Engagement Ministry, because we help feed those who are hungry. We help those who are lost in the world, and let them know that there is someone out there who's been there, done that, and with Christ, you can still make it through. And hopefully I can encourage someone to make it through tough situations. I also chose the scholarship ministries because I have a child, and I wanted her to become the best that she could be, because that's the only thing that I've always asked her, is to be the best that she could be from youth on. And my daughter was a preemie, and they used to say that she had cerebral palsy and that she wouldn't be able to do certain things. But when she went to her therapy and the doctor said block, and she said a W, and there was a W on that block, and she was 2. And so I always like working with the youth ministry and working with the young people, because I know that right now they need the most help of all. And so our children are going through a lot of persecution these days. And so I just hope that one day that I will be able to encourage one of them to keep moving forward. And that's
Growing up in a small town and clearly minority, in a predominantly Italian Catholic town, experienced a lot of prejudice and a lot of persecution, if you will, names and exclusion and all that. So I kind of identified with Smyrna because of what they had to endure, and culturally, you know. And then personally, I had to overcome because I was not a large person, and being small in stature, being just what you go through as a teenager, you know, that, and having to develop other attributes of my being, and because I was so small, I had to be a good talker, so that when everybody else wanted to fight, I could just talk them out of it. And so people got to be respectful of my vocabulary. And but having endured that and having overcome that, I identified with Smyrna because there is a crown, there is a reward for endurance and overcoming, and I've experienced some of that. So this study, Revelations, has been a revelation because I was able to see myself in the Word, and that is the power of the Word to get you to identify with what you be, and when the Word becomes an integral part of you, you see yourself in the Word. It speaks to you. And so Smyrna spoke to me, because it spoke to my experience in this world. And it also spoke to my experience as a Christian and as a believer, that everybody is not a believer. So that puts you again in a persecution position, a position to be persecuted, because much of our beliefs and our systems of belief are under attack. It had been for a long time. So Smyrna overcame. And the promise of overcoming is a crown of life. And I've experienced some of the blessings that come with endurance and overcoming.
Okay, great. We have one more.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
I wasn't here last week, so I did not prepare
externally. But I did think about this actually, and there's two that kind of spoke to me, Ephesus and Pergamos. And from a personal standpoint, as a child, I was very involved in my great-grandparents' church, from a distance in Alabama, but during the summers, and my mother's church. And I was a little disenchanted with my mother's church for a number of reasons, and with the Catholicism on my dad's side of the family. I was very disenchanted with that for a number of reasons too. So when I became a little older, I started to just go Easter and Christmas, which isn't overly dedicated. And Pergamos, because of some of my earlier activities in my younger days, I used to be a musician on the road frequently, and there's lots of crazy stuff that goes on, some of which I completely avoided, and some I didn't. And with age came a little wisdom, and I was lucky to connect with my student's parent, Monica Waller-Brown, and they would talk occasionally about things going on here, and, oh, you should come, you should come, you should come. Finally I came, and I had that connection. So for me, this has been not just eye-opening learning about, Revelation, but learning about a lot of other things that I did not know. Not just biblical things, but spiritual things and ways to look at things. And believe me, there's a long road of learning for me ahead, but I feel really good that I've started. So these two churches are really more where I came from. I would love to get to Philadelphia as my church, and it's a work in progress. So, but thank you for helping me work towards it. Appreciate that.
Okay, so I want to take an opportunity to thank everyone once again for participating, and I'll throw my little spin on there. When I reflected on this, I actually saw myself, as Deacon Bowles so nicely put, I saw my life at different periods being all these churches. And sometimes now, from day to day, I almost feel like I'm still trying to get to that church. There was a time in my life I was clearly Philadelphia, that I knew. But then there's been other times, I went through very strong trials, just like with Smyrna, just very persecuted, constantly persecuted in my ministry, cast down by several leaders. So I am still going through some of that. So I often identify with all of these churches, but I believe I'm an overcomer. And I believe because Christ overcame the world, likewise, I'm going to overcome the world. And all things are going to be changed in me, And every day I just seek to love everybody. I try to be conscious of living the life that Christ would be pleased with every day. I have a ways to go because, as we said, went through a backsliding period. I think we've all kind of dealt with that a little bit. But he said, I'm married to the backslider even. So it doesn't matter where you go in God, he's still right there. And so I thank God for knowing that and having that revelation, that we know that God is with us all the time because he's not yesterday or tomorrow, he's right now. So thank you once again for participating. I bid you all Godspeed. And now I'm going to turn it over back to